I knew the day would be chaotic the moment I walked outside and found Karen, our HOA president, self-appointed sheriff of the sidewalk cracks, destroyer of everyone's peace, standing on MY Ranch Gate at 7 a.m., wearing heels that kept sinking into the dirt and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. And before I could even ask what she was doing, she shouted, "Good morning, community member. I'm here to inform you that your ranch is now officially community property." And I swear a bird actually fell off a tree behind her from shock, because even nature wasn't prepared for that level of nonsense. And I just stared at her thinking this woman has finally achieved a world record in pure delusion. But she kept going, rambling about shared resources, communal grazing rights, and something called the Neighborhood Livestock Integration Initiative, which sounded like a bad PowerPoint. She forced someone's tired husband to create at midnight, and before I knew it, she had stepped onto my land, poked my horse with her pen, and announced that Buttercup is now technically an HOA mascot, and Buttercup looked at me with the same expression I had, pure disbelief with a sprinkle of murderous intent. So I calmly told her to get off my property, but Karen gasped like I'd slapped the queen, waved her clipboard dramatically, and shouted, "You can't talk to an HOA president like that. This is a community matter." And behind her, her two minions, Pam, who believed composting was witchcraft, and Linda, whose life mission was to submit 40 noise complaints a week, were recording on their phones as if this was some National Geographic special on angry homeowners. And I realized this was about to become one of those days that end up on YouTube with a title like HOA President Attempt to Annex Ranch. Instantly regrets it. And as she tried to walk deeper onto my property, her heel got stuck in a hole. She face-planted into a patch of mud. And while she screamed about soil sabotage, I told her exactly what I already knew I'd do. Build a fence. A big one. A beautiful one. An electric one. Because if Karen wanted community property, she was going to pay the community price. And the look she gave me was half horror, half, "I'm going to write an email so long it becomes a fire risk." But I didn't care. I was done letting the HOA invade my land like it was a buffet line. So that same afternoon, I started calling fence contractors, but when I mentioned the words "elect a perimeter," 3 of them hung up, 1 laughed, and 1 whispered, "Godspeed, brother." Like I was in a war, which honestly felt accurate, because Karen had already started what she called HOA recon patrols, where she and her minions walked the border of my ranch measuring things that didn't need measuring, and pretending to be in some kind of suburban military unit. And on day 2, I caught them crouching behind a shrub with binoculars, whispering, "Target is approaching the east boundary." And I swear to God, I've never seen a group of women dive into bushes that fast when I yelled, "I can see you," but the more they pushed, the more determined I became to install that electric fence. Not to hurt anyone, just enough voltage to give them a gentle reminder that MY property line was not a public playground. And when I finally found a contractor willing to do it, a retired electrician named Bob, whose motto was, "If it shocks Karen, I'll build it," he showed up with a truck full of supplies, a thermos the size of a toddler, and a grin like he'd been waiting his whole life for a job like this. And as we started installing the posts, the HOA patrol appeared again, gasping dramatically like we were burying treasure, and Karen screamed, "You can't electrify community land," even though she was standing on the wrong side of the property line, which I proved by showing her the certified survey report she had conveniently ignored for 6 months, and her jaw dropped so hard I heard something click. But she tried to save face by threatening me with non-existent bylaws, quoting rules she literally made up on the spot, like Section 14B. No resident may create barriers that prevent neighborly access to shared grass, which is insane because how could grass be shared across private property lines? But she insisted she was right and marched away while calling the county. Inspector Animal Control, the sheriff's office, her cousin's lawyer, and possibly a radio station, try and stop the fence from going up, but every call came back the same. "Ma'am, that's his land." And each time she heard it, she got louder, redder, and more determined to save the community, which apparently meant invade my land again. So by the time the fence was installed and powered, Karen returned with a full audience, half the HOA board, her dog Princess Sprinkles wearing a reflective vest, and a teenager holding a camcorder like this was a documentary, because she wanted to prove publicly that I was violating community rights. And before I could stop her, she marched forward, grabbed the top of the fence with both hands, and the instant the current buzzed, she let out a sound that can only be described as a cross between a microwave exploding and a goat sneezing, and fell backward into Pam, who fell into Linda, who dropped her phone into a puddle, and suddenly I had 3 HOA ladies sprawled across my dirt screaming about electrical terrorism, while Bob sipped coffee and said, well, that'll teach him. But here's where things got worse, because Karen didn't leave, didn't apologize, didn't calm down. Instead, she stood up, hair pointing in 8 directions like a Wi-Fi router, and promised, this isn't over. You will pay for this fence. You owe the community compensation. And stormed off like an angry lightning bolt. And I should have known she was planning something, because that night, around 10 p.m., I noticed something unusual. My animals were restless, pacing the fence line, staring into the dark, and when I stepped outside with flashlight, I heard it too, the crunch of footsteps near the far corner of the ranch, the whispered voices, the sound of metal tapping against the fence wiring. And as I got closer, my flashlight caught the reflection of something. Helmets, clipboards, gloves, and one giant bolt cutter. And my stomach dropped because the silhouettes were unmistakable. Karen and her HOA task force, attempting to cut to my electric fence in the middle of the night. And just as I opened my mouth to yell, someone on their team snipped a wire, and the entire fence sparked to life in a burst of blue light, followed by a scream so loud even the horses jumped. And that's when I realized they didn't just cut the fence. They triggered something much, much worse. When that blue flash lit up the entire back corner of my ranch like a budget for the July show, I sprinted toward the noise expecting to find Karen unconscious or halfway vaporized. But instead I found something far funnier and far more dangerous. The HOA task force, Karen, Pam, Linda, and 2 confused husbands who clearly didn't want to be there, dancing around in panic because the bolt cutters they'd used to snip the fence had fused themselves shut from the shock, and the entire metal frame had become a live conductor that was now stuck around Karen's wrist like some cursed medieval shackle, and she shrieked, "Turn it off! Turn it off! My bones are vibrating!" While spinning her arm like she was trying to fling the tool into orbit, and the husbands were hopping around trying not to get shocked themselves while also trying not to physically touch their wives, which honestly was the most relatable moment of the entire night. And I yelled for everyone to step back while I ran to the master switch, slapping it down and cutting the power, and the instant the buzzing stopped, Karen collapsed into the dirt like a wet rag and started screaming about how she was assaulted by a federal-grade security weapon, which was hilarious since the fence wasn't even half as strong as the one she installed around her rose bushes to keep squirrels out. But her voice quickly turned from shrieking to dramatically whispering, "You're finished." And Pam and Linda helped her sit up while the husbands shook their heads at me in that defeated look of, "We're so sorry for her existence." And I finally asked, "What are you doing here at night?" And Karen, trembling with rage and leftover electricity, waved a folder at me and hissed, "We are conducting an HOA night audit," which was the worst lie I'd ever heard because Linda still had the bolt cutters dangling from her wrist like some goth fashion accessory, and I told them flat out they were trespassing on private property in the middle of the night, which was an audit, unless their clipboard now included crimes. But Karen stood up, brushed dirt off her clothes, and declared she was going to file charges against me for setting traps, creating hazardous conditions, and this is my favorite, electrifying community airspace, whatever that means. And then she stormed off with her posse, still limping, still sparking a little where the metal had burned her sleeve, leaving me there in disbelief. But I didn't think much more would come from it until the next morning when I opened my door to find a letter taped across the entire frame with 14 pieces of glittery cat, shaped stickers, and a headline written in red marker, HOA emergency violation notice, and underneath in Karen's handwriting were the brilliant accusations: property weaponization, unauthorized perimeter installation, emotional endangerment of neighbors, and the final one that nearly made me choke on my coffee, assault via electrified vibrational harmonics, which sounded less like a rule violation and more like a rock album title. And right when I finished reading it, she appeared on my driveway again, wearing sunglasses the size of dinner plates and a neck brace that she absolutely did not need, yelling, "You will pay for my medical bills," while pointing at a brace like she was auditioning for a dramatic injury commercial. And she proceeded to inform me that the HOA had called an emergency meeting to vote on punitive fines against me, not her, claiming the community had suffered trauma from my fence, despite the fact that no one except her and her unlicensed crew had been dumb enough to touch it. And I laughed in her face, which made her gasp, snap pictures of me, and loudly narrate hostile behavior documented, like she was a police scanner, and I told her fine. Hold your meeting, do what you want. I'm not paying a single dollar for your nonsense. And she stomped away with the dignity of a very angry pigeon. And by the afternoon, the HOA meeting had begun at the clubhouse, which sits exactly 10 feet from my ranch line, so I couldn't avoid hearing the chaos. Karen yelling about bylaws, Pam crying because her phone still smelled like burnt plastic. Linda tried to convince everyone that electricity could mentally disrupt the neighborhood's aura, and the two husbands sitting in the back eating snacks, because clearly this wasn't their first HOA meltdown. And when they voted, the result was exactly what I expected, a unanimous, rigged decision to fine me $12,400 for electrical aggression, which would have made me angry if it wasn't the funniest phrase ever written. But instead of reacting, I went to the county records office the next morning and requested every single document legally proving the ranch's boundaries, ownership, zoning permissions, agricultural classification, and yes, the right to install fencing for livestock safety. And after I brought the entire binder back to the HOA board, dropped it on their table so hard it shook Karen's coffee, and said, "This is why you have zero authority over my land." The room went silent, except for Karen's jaw clicking again, and she tried to counter by saying, "The community has rights." And I responded, "Not over MY Ranch." And when she couldn't argue legally, she resorted to theatrics, standing up dramatically, declaring that she officially recognized my ranch as a restricted zone, and therefore the HOA would impose a perimeter usage tariff for anyone walking near it, which made absolutely no sense and wasn't enforceable at all. Yet she still printed flyers saying, "New fence fee, $10 per step," and distributed them like a deranged Girl Scout. But stapling them to mailboxes wasn't enough for her. No. She escalated the war by filing not one, not two, but 7 complaints with various county offices claiming my fence was militarized, hazardous, and disturbingly shiny. And each inspector who came out left more annoyed with her than with me, one even muttering, "This lady again," under his breath. But Karen didn't stop. She gathered the HOA into daily patrols again, walking property line with rulers, levels, clipboards, and at one point parachute helmets. Don't ask me why. And they acted like my fence was a ticking bomb, jumping back dramatically whenever a leaf touched it. And one day I caught Karen giving a motivational speech to her minions. "We do not fear fences. Fences fear US," which would have been inspirational if it wasn't completely delusional, and I realized then that she wasn't going to stop unless something forced her to. So I hired a property lawyer, one who specialized in HOA overreach cases, and after he reviewed everything, he gave me the best advice: make her pay. Legally, forcefully, publicly, and that gave me an idea. If she insisted my ranch was community property and kept trespassing or interfered with my fencing, then she would be liable for damages. Because guess what? Cutting or tampering with livestock fencing is a county offense that carries, wait for it, fines, serious ones. And since I had footage from the night she tried to cut it, plus her own ridiculous nighttime operation recorded on her minions' phones, plus her public rants about taking down the fence, my lawyer said we had enough evidence to drag the HOA into a legal showdown. They would absolutely lose, and I started preparing the case, gathering every video, every photo, every insane HOA flyer. Karen had taped to someone's dog, and the moment she heard I'd hired a lawyer, she completely panicked, even though she pretended not to be, showing up at my ranch with a fake friendly smile and a plate of stale cookies, saying, "We can talk this out neighbor to neighbor." But her eye was twitching like a dying Wi-Fi router, and when I didn't accept the cookies, she snapped and threatened to countersue me for electrical trauma again, which made my lawyer laugh so hard he had to mute his mic on our call. But still, this wasn't enough for Karen. She had one more card to play, one final act of suburban warfare, because the next night, around midnight again, my animals were restless again, and when I stepped outside, I saw lights near the fence, low to the ground, moving like someone crawling, and I grabbed my flashlight, walked forward slowly, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Footprints, not adult size, but small ones, and as the light swung across the grass, I heard a tiny voice whisper, "Is it safe?" And another whisper back, "Mom said cut the wire low so she can blame him." And I froze because those voices didn't belong to Karen or Pam or Linda. The moment I realized those whispers belonged to kids, actual kids, crouched near my electric fence, holding wire cutters like they were reenacting a prison break for a school talent show. My heart nearly stopped, because dealing with Karen was one thing, but dealing with children she had apparently recruited into her HOA crusade was a whole new level of suburban insanity. So I stepped forward fast, flashlight beaming directly onto the two small figures. One was maybe 10, the other maybe 12, both wearing bicycle helmets, knee pads, elbow pads, reflective vests, and little backpacks labeled HOA Junior Enforcement Team, which immediately told me everything I needed to know. Karen had finally lost her last functioning brain cell, and when the kids saw me, they froze, eyes wide like I was the final boss in a video game, and the older one squeaked. We weren't going to touch it. We were just checking. But the younger one betrayed him instantly by blurting, "Mom said if we snip the bottom wire, she'll blame you." And the older kid slapped his forehead so hard his helmet shifted sideways, and I immediately recognized them. They were Karen's nephews, the same kids who once filed a noise complaint against a rooster at 6 a.m., and I gently took the cutters from their hands, telling them they could have seriously hurt themselves. And they looked genuinely terrified, not of me, but of Karen, whispering things like, she said we can't go home if we fail the mission, and she said she'd take away my tablet, which didn't surprise me at all, but did make me incredibly angry. So I brought them to my porch, gave them water, and called their parents, Karen's sister and brother-in-law, who showed up 20 minutes later, breathless and furious, because they had no idea Karen had taken their kids, given them protective gear, and sent them on a midnight sabotage mission on private property. And when the parents asked them why they agreed, the older kid shrugged and said, Aunt Karen said it was community service for the greater good, and their dad muttered, "I'm going to strangle that woman." And before leaving, he grabbed my shoulder and said, "If you need us as witnesses for anything, we're in," which was about the best gift anyone could have given me at that moment. But little did I know this was only the beginning of how badly things were about to collapse. For Karen, because the next morning the entire neighborhood exploded with gossip. Apparently the kids told their friends, who told their parents, who told relatives, who told co-workers. So by noon, everyone knew that Karen had sent minors to tamper with an electric fence at midnight, and by 2 p.m. the HOA group chat was on fire, with messages like, "Did Karen really make children do her dirty work?" And "Is sabotaging livestock fencing even legal?" Asking for a friend. And by 4 p.m. someone leaked security camera footage of Karen marching the kids across the street wearing their little HOA vests, telling them, "Remember, aim for the lowest wire. If the rancher complains, it's harassment." And the video spread like wildfire until even people outside our subdivision were sharing it, mocking her, calling her General Karen of the Suburban Infantry. And someone even made a remix called Snip the Wire, which I admit I listened to at least 4 times before bed. But Karen was not handling her downfall well. She spent the whole day sending long, unhinged voice notes to the community, blaming everyone but herself, claiming the footage was deepfake technology, claiming the kids volunteered, claiming I had masterminded the scenario to frame her, which was hilarious considering one of her minions, Pam, accidentally posted a behind-the-scenes photo of the kids being briefed with the caption, "HOA Junior Night Ops," before deleting it 30 seconds later. And I watched all this unfold like a live reality show until finally, the county safety inspector showed up at her house, not mine, to question her about endangering minors, and she tried to slam the door at his face. But he put his boot in the doorway and said, "Ma'am, step aside." And that's when the panic really set in. She started pacing the neighborhood in a sun hat at 9 p.m. yelling at anyone who made eye contact, ranting that the community had betrayed her, and that the rancher is corrupting the neighborhood with false narratives, which was ironic since the only false narratives came from her clipboard. And by the next morning, the HOA board called another emergency meeting, this time without her, because they were finally afraid of legal liability, and I attended that meeting just to watch the chaos unfold. And oh boy, it was worth attending. Pam cried. Linda tried to shift blame onto Karen. 2 board members quit on the spot. And when Karen eventually barged into the room screaming, "You can't have a meeting without me. This is my community," one of the board members actually said, "Karen, please sit down. We're trying to unfire you with dignity." And she screamed, "You can't fire a volunteer," which was technically true, but somehow still made everything funnier. And after 2 hours of arguing, finger-pointing, crying, and one dramatic fainting performance, guess who? The board officially removed Karen as HOA president banned. her from making policy decisions, suspended her patrols, and revoked her access to the neighborhood email system, which was the closest thing to peace our community had felt in years. But the war wasn't over yet, because removing Karen from power didn't magically fix the fact that she had filed fines against me, filed false complaints with county departments, trespassed repeatedly, vandalized my fence, and used minors to do it. And my lawyer told me, we go after her personally now, not the HOA. And let me tell you, the timing could not have been more perfect, because a day after she was removed, a certified envelope arrived at her doorstep with my lawyer's name in bold letters, and I watched from my ranch porch as she opened it, read the first line, and let out a shriek so sharp birds flew out of 3 different trees, and she stormed across the street, waving the letter at me, yelling, "You think you can scare me with legal papers? I am the community." And I calmly told her the truth, that she owed damages for cutting my fence, trespassing, endangering kids, interfere with livestock safety, causing property repair costs, and filing false county complaints, and that she would be responsible for all costs because the HOA had just voted to not defend her or cover any of her actions, meaning she was now truly, deeply, catastrophically alone in this mess she created. And she went silent, absolutely silent, for the first time in recorded history, staring at the paper like it was a cursed prophecy, and then, just when I thought she was finally defeated, her face twisted into a smile, a slow, unsettling smile that made every hair on my neck stand up, and she whispered, "You think I'm the only one you're fighting?" Before pulling out her phone, tapping something and saying, "I wasn't acting alone, and now you've started a war you can't win." And right then, several cars rolled into the neighborhood. 3 SUVs, windows, tinted dark, stopping right in front of our house, and people began stepping out wearing matching navy polos with gold lettering on the back that read, "Regional HOA Enforcement Division," and they were walking straight toward my ranch. When those SUVs pulled up and the so-called Regional HOA Enforcement Division stepped out like they were a SWAT team for broken sprinklers and trash can violations, I honestly thought I was being pranked, because who in their right mind needs custom uniforms and matching clipboards to deal with a ranch fence? But nope. These people were dead serious, marching in perfect formation toward my property line, while Karen stood behind them with her arms crossed like she was some fallen dictator making her dramatic comeback. And the lead guy, a tall, square-jawed man who looked like he ironed his polos while wearing them, introduced himself as Regional Compliance Officer Stevens, flashing a badge that looked like it was printed at Office Depot, and he announced, loudly and formally, "We are here to conduct a multi-tier perimeter audit in response to community distress reports," while holding a stack of paperwork, so thick it looked like the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I stared at him and asked, "Are you actually serious right now?" But he didn't flinch, not even when a baby goat wandered up and tried to eat his shoelace. He just cleared his throat and continued. "We received multiple complaints of weaponized fencing, unsafe rural equipment, and hostile interactions." And behind him, Pam and Linda were nodding frantically, while Karen smirked like she had resurrected her power through some HOA dark magic ritual. But before I could even answer, my lawyer, who I had texted one single word, "Help," pulled up in his beat-up Prius like a knight in shining armor, stepped out, and calmly began recording everything, which immediately made the regional squad uncomfortable, because apparently even fake authority gets shaky when a real attorney shows up, and Stevens asked, "Sir, who are you?" And my lawyer replied, "Someone you should have Googled before showing up." And that's when the confidence in Stevens' shoulders shrank by exactly 12%. But Karen shoved him forward, whisper hissing, "Do something." And Stevens tried to regain control by declaring they had authority under Regional Covenant Article 47B, which sounded impressive until my lawyer pulled out the actual state statutes and said, "There's no such article," and then handed Stevens a highlighted section of county law stating HOAs had 0 jurisdiction over agricultural property, 0 enforcement powers over livestock fencing, and 0 ability to perform audits of land they didn't control. And Stevens stared at the paper like it was a breakup letter, then said, "Well, we still need to examine the perimeter." And my lawyer replied, "Touch that fence and you'll be charged with trespass and tampering." And suddenly the entire regional team froze mid-step, as if it had hit them with an invisible pause button, and the husbands, who were watching from the sidewalk, began laughing so hard one of them snorted. And while everyone was standing there awkwardly, my lawyer began asking each of the regional members, individually, who hired you? And one by one they pointed at Karen, who was now turning the shade of a traffic cone, and Stevens muttered, "We were told this was community-owned land." And my lawyer raised his eyebrows and said, "So you took money to enforce rules on land you didn't verify?" And when he phrased it like that, the entire regional team suddenly looked like they regretted every career choice they had ever made, especially when he added, "That's fraud and impersonation of an enforcement officer, both crimes." And Stevens immediately dropped his clipboard, saying, "Ma'am, we're leaving." But Karen stepped in front of him, shrieking, "And no, you're not. You work for me. I am the community." And Stevens replied, "No, ma'am, we work for whoever paid the invoice." And the neighbors gasped so loudly it sounded like someone opened a vacuum seal, because his wording basically confirmed Karen had hired these people with HOA funds, or worse, personal checks, while pretending they were real officials, and the HOA board members who had gathered by now slowly turned toward her with the expression of people who just realized they were standing next to a lit stick of dynamite, and one of them whispered, "Karen, tell us you didn't," but she couldn't, because her silence was all the confession anyone needed. And that's when everything collapsed. Stevens ordered his team back into the SUVs, apologizing repeatedly to me, to my lawyer, to the neighbors, and before he left he said, "We will be refunding the contract. Please don't press charges," which was adorable, because my lawyer already had his lawsuit outline color-coded, and the moment the SUVs rolled out of the subdivision, the entire neighborhood turned on Karen like synchronized swimmers of rage, everyone shouting at once. "You spent our dues on fake enforcers? You used children in your schemes. You trespassed at midnight. You electrocuted yourself and blamed him." And Karen tried, she really tried, to defend herself, yelling things like, "I was protecting community," and he's weaponizing livestock, and the fence buzzes at night. You can feel ITS energy, and my favorite one, he has goats with bad attitudes. But no one was listening anymore. The HOA board formally voted to permanently remove her, hand her actions over to county investigators, and strip her of any authority, privileges, or committee involvement, including her precious seasonal wreath regulation subcommittee. And when she saw she was truly defeated, she let out a scream so long the goats paused chewing just to stare, and she ran, literally ran, back to her house, slammed the door, and for the first time since I had moved here, the neighborhood was actually peaceful, like someone had hit mute on an entire hurricane. And over the next few weeks, everything fell into place beautifully. The kids' parents filed their own complaints. The county shut down Karen's bogus reports. The HOA refunded everyone's dues that she had misused, and my lawyer worked his legal magic until Karen was personally responsible for reimbursing the cost of my fence repairs, the ranch inspections, and even the legal fees she herself had triggered, and she fought. She fought away only a Karen could, sending handwritten appeals written in glitter pen, leaving emotional hardship affidavits in people's mailboxes, and even staging a one-woman protest with a sign that said, "Down with electric tyranny," but none of it worked. And finally, after months of chaos, Karen was forced to pay everything she owed with interest, and the day she wrote that final check, she actually muttered, "I hope your fence shocks you in your sleep," which made my lawyer laugh so hard he nearly dropped the payment receipt. But here's the best part. After all of this, after fines, the humiliation, the community backlash, the termination, the investigations, after everything she put the entire neighborhood through, I saw her one morning staring at my fence from across the street with measuring tape in her hand, muttering numbers to herself, and I walked over just to see what ridiculous conspiracy she was cooking up, and she looked at me with the most serious expression and said, "I hope you're happy. Because of all this, I've decided to run for president of the regional HOA consortium." And I stared at her, absolutely speechless, until she added, "When I win, I'm coming for your fence on a statewide level." Then she got into her car and sped away like a cartoon villain, leaving me on my porch wondering whether I should laugh, cry, or buy a taller fence. But before I could decide, my phone buzzed with a notification from the community group. Chat. Someone had spotted her applying for the position, wearing a brand new polo shirt with the words "Karen," making neighborhoods fearful again embroidered on the back. Meaning the war might not actually be over, it might have just gone statewide.